with it. And I believe that might be my time, guys. So
thank you so much, Elise. Yes, I am ready to take on the day. Thank you for joining us for our first webinar of the year, How Leading with Intentions Creates a Culture of Support. I hope you all are ready. We started off just centering ourselves and getting the energy needed to stay focused and engaged. Like you already know, hey, you aren't just watching a webinar, you are a part of it. So let's get ready. Have you ever worked with a leader that focused more on intentions than their impact? Reflect on this for a moment, okay? Reflect on the moments where you've engaged with leaders that focus more on their intentions and impact. Have you ever heard these phrases? Well, that wasn't my intentions. I'm sorry about that. Or I'm surprised that this new approach impacted the team in this way. I didn't intend to it. Many leaders are married to their intent, even if their actions or the impact never align. When this occurs, we weaken the foundation of our culture, and humanity at large begins to suffer. Why? Because trust and hope, it begins to fade, eventually birthing a culture of cynicism and discontentment. To be an effective leader, having the best of intent doesn't matter. There's this famous quote that I heard, and it said, it's not intentions that matter. It's the actions. We are what we do, not what we intend to. Intentional leaders aren't solely focused on checking goals off their list. Instead, they are on a purposeful, deliberate pursuit of a greater mission or vision. These intentional leaders that we have with us today are cut from a different cloth of leadership. They are very attentive to their people's internal sense of value while also generating external value to their clients. Welcome, everyone. I am Hakimia Jackson, Executive Coach, DEI Board Advisor, and CEO of Divinely Power. And today I'm your moderator. And I want to welcome these brilliant minds that we have with you all today. Meredith, founder and CEO of ThinkHuman. Sarah, co-founder and president of Bravely. Projal, CEO of On Loop. Welcome. And I hope you all are feeling centered and present today and ready to have an intentional and impactful webinar today. So let's get started. Open to all, everyone off mute. How do you define intentions as a leader?
I'll jump in. I'll start us off. I think of intention as the thing that gives rise to goals, action, policies, structures. Intention is the thing that gives birth to all those things. And I think it's born from desire.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and just reflecting on sort of this topic overall, for me, it's about awareness and knowing sort of what is driving a lot of my actions and sort of bringing back control to a more centered and internal locus of control versus one that might be externally controlled. And we often talk about sort of separating signal from noise. And for me, it's about ensuring that I'm able to sort of respond to signal versus being distracted or moved by noise in what is a very noisy world.
Hello. I just want to say that was so wonderful with Elise. I hope we get to share her contact information because I want to bring her into Bravely to do that with my team. So I just felt like I needed to say that out of the gate. Thank you for having her today. It makes me think about what we just did together, intention, because it's almost like a form of meditation for me when I think about it. Allows us, when we have an intent, and I shared this with you, Hakimia, before, that one of the things when I interact with people, in particular people on my team, I have this intent always that no matter how difficult the conversation might be, that they leave feeling better, that they leave feeling taken care of. And that allows me, when I enter any conversation, to be in a space where I'm centered, that I don't react, that I stay focused, that I lead with kindness, and without that personal intention that I bring into every conversation or interaction. I think I know that I would probably get triggered by things or have moments that I reflected later on and regretted. And that doesn't mean that those moments still don't happen, because I'm a human being. But I think having that reminder always of what I intend for the outcome to be is really helpful in small things and the bigger cross-functional organizational outcomes that I'm looking to achieve as well.
Yes, very well said. I want to pull on a couple of points that you all said. And Hallie, thank you so much. She said, leave taken care of. Wow, that's powerful. So thank you so much, Hallie, for that. For y'all, you talked about, being, that connected to that signal and not the noise. Elaborate on that, because we had a really good conversation prior to the webinar, all of us, about what does that exactly mean?
Yeah, and I shared this with a couple of folks. Ironically, I said deep intentionality as a theme for the year, and coming out of 2021, I felt that in my career there was more noise in terms of what was happening in the world than ever before, and that's across tech, that's across society, that's across government, that's across the environment. And at a pace that I don't remember sort of seeing across so many diverse topics. And I think each of us are sort of living a path whereby we have our own sort of desire to impact and desire to improve and desire to change. And often, especially when you're a founder or a CEO, it can be tough to make sure that you sort of stay centered on that impact or that change that you want to be driving and seeing in the world, and sort of not get affected by that change. And so, Meredith talked about how intention drives goals and
Yes.
drives processes, and goals and goal setting is often sort of overused, but it is really about sort of setting North Stars and setting what each person and each company's sort of reason for being is, and coming back to that and using that as a way to center yourself. And I'll often go back and read our strategy decks or other pieces, because you often need reminders, even in your physical space, to bring you back to, this is why I exist, or this is why we exist, and this is what we're trying to drive. And so it's about coming back to that North Star, or coming back to that sort of focal point that guides our actions as individuals, as well as teams and organizations.
I'd love to jump in on that if I can, Hakimi. I don't want to, is that all right?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
I heard from this mentor of mine that I love, this expression, the compass and the clock. And to me, intention is the compass and goals are the clock.
Ooh, I like that. Okay, so that's the message, everybody. So we need to hear that again. How about you repeat that?
Yes, intention is the compass and goals are the clock. So you could be like lost at sea, but you can find the compass and be redirected onto the path. The clock is like, am I keeping up with am I checking the minute, and are the goals the right, and goals can change also inside an intention. It's like, all right, that intention gives rise, like those goals expired, but that intention gives rise, or that compass gives rise to new goals, or we decide that process was garbage, like that looked right in from like a previous view or lens or framework of thinking, but with this intention and my new growth, new goals or processes arise. And I wanted to say one other thing about Poojal's expression of signal and noise, which to me is like, it's so powerful.
Mhm.
Another person that I love, Elizabeth Cutler, one of the Soul Cycle founders, talks about high signal, low noise as a way to lead one's life and lead an organization. And I feel like in that paradigm of high signal, low noise, for ourselves, we just keep trying to like, okay, clear the noise. And I can say I live in a very noisy internal world. So it's like, all right, how do I clear the noise so the signal is clear and keeping that clear? And then as a leader, clearing the noise for others. So, because everybody in the organization is living in this incredibly noisy world and organizational noise, not just world noise of like this priority, that priority, this priority. And so making that signal or beacon really strong. So the intention is unwavering and clear, and clearing the noise.
Yeah. I like to think of it in terms of, and someone else coined this term too, but I use it a lot, that clarity is kindness. So in particular, right now, I see a lot of, even on my own team, like there's shifting priorities constantly. And the best and I think most powerful thing I can do for those around me is continue to create clarity for them so that they know the direction that they're going. When I think about the here and now, there are a handful of people on my team in the last week that have had COVID. I have 4 moms who, and there are men on my team too, but for whatever the reason, it's just the moms right now who work for me, who all have had to bring their children home from daycare because the facilities are closed for the rest of the month. So we're talking about weeks of this. And in the absence of clarity, they wouldn't really clarity around, you are empowered to take as much flexibility and time as you need right now. Clarity around like, what are the goals ahead of you for the next few weeks? If we're not able to create that, and I think it ties back to servant leadership, if we're not able to create this kind of forward movement for our teams and people, then that's, I think, where all of the wires get crossed, and that's where burnout happens.
Just one point on that. I feel like we're doing these sort of ways to think about sort of noise and signal. I think the other sort of phrase that I often remind myself on the team is sort of distinguishing between motion and progress, especially in sort of a fast-moving startup, because it's easy to sort of just keep doing, but not actually have a vector or have a compass that guides that. And we talk about busy work and we talk about those pieces. And I think, Sarah, to your point around just everything happening in the world, I think, we don't have space to sort of move in ways that are not creating impactful forward movement. And I think at a time when there is a lot of fatigue, there is a lot of difficulty that people are going through just from a health perspective, society perspective, I think it becomes all the more important that we use people's finite time and finite energy in a way that is productive. And as leaders sort of provide that clarity and provide that ability to make more happen with less, and sort of not be in this abyss of constant motion.
Thank you so much, Rojal, for sharing that. So how do we make more happen with less? And I heard Meredith as well as Sarah, we all talked about priorities and goal setting. How, when you think about measuring your intentions, do you measure it by the goals that you achieve, or is it the impact? Like, how do you relate to your intentions and how do you measure those? Jump in.
I'll jump in first. It's I'm excited to hear everybody else, but for me, I don't really use intention as something that I'm measuring. I use intention to birth goals and then measure the goals and then make sure the goals are aligned with my intentions, whether those are organizational intentions or personal intentions. But goals can be tracked in spreadsheets and OKRs, and there's all sorts of ways that we can track goals. But to me, intention it not only gives birth to goals, but intention is big enough that for me, in my own definition of intention, how the world looks and what I should be measuring changes as I grow, even if the intention is unchanging. So what might have been the right goals for that intention 5 years ago, there are different goals now, and I am now measuring those.
Right. And talk about that, Meredith, because we had a conversation on that, right? Your intentions as a senior leader changed now as a founder and CEO.
Say it one more time, Hakimi.
I said, I know we had a conversation on how your intentions as a younger professional senior leader, and it transitioned or evolved now that you are.
All right. Well, redirect me if this is not where you want me going. But in my 20s, I was an executive. I was an SVP of a company in my late 20s, and I was way more bold and confident about my intentions. I was like, I got my intentions clear. I'm making this happen. I'm making that happen. And I was. And I was like, I got a lot figured out. And then more of life happened to me, and things that really, in some cases, humbled me to my knees. Like redirect me if this isn't where you want me going, Hakimia, but I had a child who died at birth, and I had a lot of intention around how that was going to go. I was not going into that experience like unintentional. I had so much intention, and in that experience and many others that happened through my life, I was like, okay, my intentions are a piece of the puzzle, and I am in a conversation with the universe, with all the other people that are here, and attuning myself to like them, and then the forces of the universe. And that as that happened, like, let me not try to paint a pile of Drek pink. It's not trying to make something terrible good, but in those like shattering experiences, I'd reverse them in an instant, let that be clear, but I also came to see for myself that they grew me in ways that I like never could have dreamed of. They weren't even dreams that I was like, oh, I hope I grow in these ways. They were so much bigger than I could imagine in terms of my growth. And as I like stretched into those spaces, I was like, okay, the world looks different, and my intentions remain the same, but who I am inside those intentions and the goals that I have and how I'm connected to creating things change. So it went from a much more like me and the world to me in the ecosystem of humanity and the universe, and intention being something much more collaborative.
I think what you're describing, Meredith, and you and I have talked about this before in the past, and it just, I have so much compassion and empathy for your personal experience. And I think what we've seen over the last 2 years for the first time is an openness, because I'm going to make an assumption that probably like in the corporate environment that you were in years ago, that it probably didn't feel safe and open for you to bring that piece of yourself to work. And we're seeing companies now, Bumble is one of them, that has gone to great lengths to share that women who have experienced miscarriages, as an example, I'm one of those women, who went back to work like the next day, that they should be taking time off. And that they can stand up and share this experience. And we could probably name like 100 other examples of this. I was sharing with someone on my team, some of the most difficult times in our lives are when we go through breakups or divorces, but we can't take time off from work when we're going through that. Like, that's not something, we could take PTO, but it's not like the death of a family member in terms of like the benefits and resources that are available to us. And I bring all of this up because I think what you're sort of touching on is that we're in the middle of this transformation right now that's really, I think, just kicking up all of the dirt that says like, we've got to be a different type of, I mean, humanity has to be different, but the workplace has to like really turn over here, and we have to start. And I think it starts with intent. And someone in the chat had brought up like, what's the difference between intent and intuitiveness? And it made me think about like, as a leader, and for me as a founder of a company, I'm thinking about every person that works for Bravely. But you kind of know intuitively when things aren't going right.
Right.
You know, my intent as the founder of this company is to have a fun and vibrant, open, caring culture where, you know, if someone like you, Meredith, had the experience that you had, that they would feel supported at the highest level, right? And I think we know intuitively when that's not happening. And that's where action comes in, because we can no longer sit in our seats and be a part of what has happened in the past, where we just don't stand up and say, this isn't right, or we need to think differently about this. And, you know, Hakimia and I held a lot of conversations in 2022 after George Floyd's murder. And, you know, so much for me was transformed like through what I learned from Hakimia and some of the other people that I worked with during that time. And that's just another example of like our intent, that it's not enough. Like we've got to start taking a stand for what we know is right, even if it means like that we might potentially, you know, create some inequity here because we've given Meredith more time than everyone else. We know what Meredith needs it right now. So that's just what we have to do.
Mm-hmm. And Sarah, you talked a lot about that individualized support. I love that. But I want to pull you into the conversation. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say the term "bringing your whole self to work" I think is an important one, and I think that we're also going through an international labor movement right now on sort of how people look at that. And you know, I'm a huge believer that unless I know fully what's going on with somebody, there is no way for me as a leader to really think about what is optimal for that person in that moment. And one of the things that, you know, we've had to rethink as a company is what cadences we have as an organization. And sort of we now have functional daily stand-ups that I try to join. And we try and do 15 minutes. But for me, I'm just able to take away quite a bit from just hearing someone's tone of voice or sort of just their energy in the room, for even if they're talking for 30 or 60 seconds. And we can do that today in a smaller org. But I think Meredith, thank you for sharing what you said in such a public and wide forum. And I think organizations need to create that space where people feel like they can bring these things up. And sometimes we can unintentionally not create those spaces because people might have views of what a CEO is like or what kind of conversations you can have. And you have to overcome a lot of hurdles to be like, it is okay to talk about everything. And, you know, I went through a phase as a leader where I'm like, why is someone scared of me? There's no reason to be scared. Like, why are they worried? But you have to realize that you have to take that extra effort to create that space. And it's just not going to automatically happen. And it's even that much harder where a lot of our colleagues are not spending time with each other. And there are folks that have never met each other. And that sort of makes it that much more important to be intentional about creating that trust and creating those spaces. And so cadences matter. And I think as leaders, we need to be thinking of what cadences we run in our orgs to ensure that that space is created.
I would just love to really highlight, because we have so many people ops leaders in this call, just to highlight what I'm seeing is that crossroads of our policies, organizational policies and intention, things like leave policy and meeting cadences, like sometimes there's just like live in the background of like the unconscious ways that we do things, but they're policies. They're like, you know, structures and policies that we have, or even norms, like, is it safe to communicate something vulnerable, and what are the norms in the organization? And I think that intention, when we have an intention, for example, to have a place that is a culture of support or that feels safe to communicate, the first thing that comes up once we have that intention is, are we willing to be honest looking at ourselves to see where we're out of sync with that. Because if you have a big and bold enough intention, probably, I know for ThinkHuman, you're out of sync a lot of places, not because you don't have the best of intentions, but because if the intention is, in my view, big and beautiful enough, that just makes a big gap. And then it's like, all right, well, what are all the things that we have to look at in terms of how our policies do not yet support that, or how our structures do not yet support that, how our norms don't support that. And then it doesn't stop there. That's like, you know, the start of the party. Then it's like, okay, so now what? And how do we, if we're willing to look at that as part one, now what do we want to take on? And that's where the goal setting comes. So it's not just intention about our personal lives or intention about our business, but intention about our culture. And then having those intentions lead to real conversation of where are we off track and what are we doing about it?
Yes, well said. I have a question now. What do we do in those instances? You know, Meredith, to your point, where we do recognize that there are some policies and procedures that may be antiquated. And it started off with pure intentions, but now it's just, it's time for us to shift the culture in the way where the culture is going, or just in a way to be innovative. What steps or just recommendations you would encourage these people leaders here to first do?
I'll turn it first to one of you. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just giving a talk last week on building a culture of compassion. And the first thing I think companies have to do, it doesn't feel like it would be the first step in creating a culture of compassion, but it's auditing all of your benefits and resources. And I would say that it's important to do this because it's a requirement. Employees or potential candidates or people that want to work for your company are coming in with a very different set of questions and expectations. They want to know what you stand for. Do you support, you know, not just their development goals as an individual, but they want to know, you know, what's your stance on social injustice? You know, how do you think about the environment? It's a very different world right now. Like the candidate market is absolutely insane. We were talking about this before we went live. That hiring is just, it's a different ballgame now. The candidate is in the driver's seat. But beyond that, it's about thinking more deeply about the individual. And that goes back to what you were saying, Hakimi, about individualized support. It's really difficult to find resources that at scale, so everyone has access to it, make the person feel like when they walk through the door of whatever it is you're offering, that this is about me. But that's the future. It's figuring out how, you know, how are Meredith's versus Sarah's needs different, and how do we meet them? And I also think that, you know, we talk about people leaders finally having a seat at the table. I keep saying they're like at the head of the table now. Thank God, like the world just clued into like focusing on people is the answer. Ta-da, like, can you believe it? But sorry, I have a cough drop in my mouth if you can hear me like swirling around. I've been having coughing attacks lately. But I think that there's also now this like requirement for us, in those of us like in a people role, to just push back. You have the power now, use it. You know, go take it as far as you possibly can. And that's going to enable all of the other people on your team, like, or when I think about it, like extending at least all the way down to managers, where they start to have this freedom to create these cultures that we've dreamt about. But you have to be the one to create like that environment where they can move around in it and have the flexibility to try different things.
Yeah, I think, you know, as Meredith said a while ago, I think first off is accepting what's broken. And I think as leaders, we can get attached to something we decided a while ago and not be able to let go. And one of my favorite phrases in business is loosely held strong beliefs. And I think that applies to the world too. And I think when you as a leader show up and said, hey, this is what we did, here's why, and here's why it doesn't work anymore, or we made a mistake of holding on for too long, people appreciate that. And you don't have to necessarily sugarcoat it or go around it. You can just be upfront about, this is what we decided, here's why, and that's evolved. And I think that sort of owning it and owning change and sort of not beating around the bush is often the first stance. And people aren't stupid, and people know what's going on, and they can see through it. And so, as a leader, my job is to own what decisions we make, and then course correct as we go, because we are human and we aren't perfect.
Repeat that, Projal. That was a message. Someone else is asking. Could he repeat that for me? You said,
no, we're human.
Yeah,
we're
go
human
ahead.
and we aren't perfect.
In that part about loosely held strong beliefs.
Loosely held strong beliefs, correct.
Yes. All right.
And,
So go ahead, Projal.
no, I mean, that applies to everything. It applies to people strategies, it applies to business strategies, it applies to goals, it applies to all of the above. And I think getting comfort with it also lets you move on and not be anxious and not hold on to things that don't serve you anymore.
And I want to just add one thing into the mix about moving a culture in that direction, and that is the collective versus a top-down approach to culture. And that, we could have a whole discussion about what is culture and defining it, but just to jump to the chase, I think that a top-down approach to culture repeatedly, for everybody who's tried it, falls flat. And that culture lives in all the invisible behaviors and norms and expectations and meetings that we're not in as leaders. And so if it's not a collective shared vision and intention held by all, it can't keep birthing all the things it births every day. So I think that I saw in the chat, somebody asked the question, what do you do if leadership isn't aligned with a culture of support? And we might have contentious views among this panel, I'm not sure, but my general view is that people are, sometimes people are open and sometimes people can be brought around, and dialogue to inch people forward, like shifts mindsets, and that's a beautiful thing. But I also, and some people are like more oriented around, I really want to be the one to try to change this leadership culture. And for those people who feel motivated, inspired by that, that's amazing, because those change makers are fantastic. But I also feel like for many people ops leaders, it's like, all right, well, can I just find a garden where they want a culture of support and then grow that garden? Because when you find leadership that has general support for that, but they can't make it real, they're stuck or thwarted, which there's a lot of that around, then it's like, okay, now we can grow that garden together. And when there's real opposition to it, in my experience, this is like getting into the world of influence. It's about finding the what's in it for them. Like, why would they want that? And when they can see that, sometimes that opens perspectives.
Yeah, turnover is a great motivator right now for business leaders. Someone was talking about like, how do you, for smaller companies, like these new progressive resources can feel out of reach. And I relate to that, honestly. I have a small-ish company with 60 people. And we don't have the budget necessarily to offer everything. But when you model it out and think about, if I were to lose people, which is very likely right now, even if they're happy at your company, they have probably 10 to 20 inbound requests a week from recruiters, enticing them with more money or a better culture. And so you really have to weigh the investment. And in our case, like we've decided, and we just hired a chief people officer, which I'm thrilled about, and cannot wait to share more broadly when they join. But the whole idea here is we've got to make some big bets in order to retain our people. And I will say, even though I'm thrilled, going back to your point, Meredith, I cannot wait for our chief people officer to start. I also am reminding myself that they are not going to solve all the problems.
Right.
It's about a shared responsibility. but you can't have shared responsibility if you don't create the space for other people to experiment or have some flexibility in creating these cultures that we're talking about. I've definitely worked in environments where the broader culture was not what my team culture was. I was leading a sales team and people are always like, why doesn't anybody leave? I'm like, because they're cared for here. They know that they have a voice. They know that they have support. So it is possible. I know that it's really difficult. I certainly don't want to say like, all you have to do is create it yourself. But I do think it is possible to create cultures within cultures on teams, so that people want to continue to work with you.
And they can be contagious. People say like, what's happening over there? That's interesting. And then those bright spots lead to other bright spots.
That's right.
I see Michael's asked, oh, sorry, Prajal, please.
No, I just thought of a term, and I know that these terms are helpful, but people talk about talent density as sort of quality of talent. But what I've seen in orgs is that you have pockets of culture density, and some orgs are more denser with the culture you want to create, and actually it serves really well to set an example when you may not have a leader or a particular individual that may not subscribe to that philosophy or ability to sort of point towards that. And to your retention point, like we've seen that prove out at our organization too, where there is cultural density around an amazing leader, people are just fundamentally happy. It doesn't cost money, and you don't need budget, and it just requires attention and effort, and the simple things matter a lot. But we really subscribe to the philosophy that culture gets formed in teams and not in companies. And so as we think about our product, we call it collaborative team development, and we believe that the future is in teams and teams forming their own cultures. And obviously as a CEO, you want every team to sort of embody that, but that also doesn't happen as perfectly as we would like. Sorry, Brad.
This is obvious to be said. It sounds like perhaps it is, but given how impactful people leaders are, managers, we can infuse even the shared intention of a culture of support, but so many people leaders are thrust into that role without knowing how to do that. And maybe they get equipped with like, here's the checklist for how to do a one-on-one. Here's how the performance cycle works. Here's how, a structure for accountability. Like even if we equip managers with tools and frameworks, how to create a culture of support doesn't come just from intention. Like intention can guide it like a magnet, but it's also supporting people to grow in the ways that they know what to dial up and what to dial down in order to deliver on that within their teams. And those kinds of manager development programs that focus not just on quick skill acquisition, but really those mindset shifts and tools to build a culture of support.
You're on mute, Sarah.
Sorry, preventing all of you from hearing me cough. I obviously am the founder of a coaching company, but I really do believe that coaching for me has helped identify some of the patterns that keep me from maybe like giving the feedback that I need to give, or standing up or dying on hills that I haven't in the past. And so finding either a mentor or someone that can really give you, none of us want to hear this from our partner. I was telling the team earlier here that my partner told me that he was proud of me because I've been consistent drinking warm lemon water every morning. And I was like, get out of here. I was like mad at him for applauding me. So like, imagine us going to the people in our personal lives for information about like, how should I deal with this? Which is what we do, right? But we need to find these like neutral parties in our life, mentors, coaches that we can go to continue to develop as leaders. And the other thing, because it's not the people in our personal life, we won't receive it well. If I can't receive a compliment about drinking warm water with lemon, I'm not going to receive feedback on my leadership skills. But the other thing I would say that I've kind of like been pretty radical about recently in my interviews of senior level people at my company is I just say to them, if you are not interested in being an inspiring leader across the organization, this isn't the fit for you. Like, I just make this statement. I weave it into every interview, and I make sure that up front from the talent acquisition team that it doesn't matter if you're an individual contributor or one of the senior most people at our organization. Like, if you are not bought into building the culture and having accountability in doing that, then this isn't the place for you. And I say it in a nice way. I feel like I'm saying it more aggressive now, but it's like, people have to join you in this, and you got to be upfront about it.
Yeah. All right, Sarah, everybody's going to walk away being radicalist now.
Threaten people in their interview. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so I do want to go back to a community question. Michael asked, it'll be great to hear about the relationship between organizational core values and intentionality.
I mean, I can start that, as we are talking through things, one of our values is nurture, and I love the word nurture, and is one of the first things we did when we sort of, formed a company and got together. And I think it's not just words, but also how you describe a particular value that I think communicates a lot. And actually, a lot of folks who've sort of, come with us and said they want to be part of what we're building has sort of read those values and read the sort of 10 or 15 or 20 words that accompany a particular word or a particular phrase. And sometimes people focus on the word or the phrase, but it's really about how you talk about it. That also does a really good job of communicating who you are. And one thing I've learned over time, and I'm still terrible at it, is that writing is powerful, and writing things down and taking that effort to put it down does make a real impact. And so for me as an organization, and values can be sort of abused or sort of not used the right way, but you can call it vision, mission, values. You can call it a set of principles. You can call it a set of beliefs. I think writing things down makes a difference, and sort of when you have that as an artifact and going back to it and reminding yourself of it, I think reminds you of that intentionality and being able to sort of guide your overall behavior.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll just add on like a +1 and say that I think that vision, like your 10-year vision, your 3-year vision, like those visions that are not just here, the goals for the year. I'm going to come back to core values, I promise, but I'm just going to step out for a second. That the vision gives, like, it acts as a magnet. Like the vision is the intention articulated to the best of our ability in a moment to say like this is our intention for how the future looks 10 years from now, because we were here, and writing that out, and then having that shared and get feedback from the collective inside the organization, so that it's not just an exercise of the leadership team, but really a collective effort that's supported and people's questions answered and input integrated, so that there is this shared intention that can be held. And we're in the process of that now. So I don't want to stand like on a soapbox and be like, we're following all our steps, because we're muddling our way through all of it now. But having that kind of shared vision, I think, acts as a magnet that gives rise to, well, what should we focus on? What should we prioritize? What should the goals be for this year? And where are we against that bigger compass? And then I think core values act to, first, and this is a statement of the obvious, but attract people who share those values. So they're like, yes, I want to vibrate at this vibration. This is the world for me. And then act as magnets themselves for behavior. So where vision acts as a magnet for action and goals that drive the organization forward, I think core values act as a magnet for what kind of behavior is wanted here and not wanted here. So I think they both feed people's intention and are created by intention.
I think just one thing I'll add there quickly, that something that Matt just said at the end, which I think is powerful and important, is culture can't be everything too, and you can't be sort of motherhood and apple pie, and cannot be a collection of everything good in the world. And I think, good cultures are strong cultures that also sort of stand for what they're not, and then something that I talk about internally at our company too is that startups are tough, and requires a sense of strength and grit to sort of really sort of build and go through the peaks and troughs, and grit is equally a part of our culture as nurture is, and people may not have space for grit based on sort of what's happening in their lives and where they are. And so I think it's important in culture to also make sure you tell people what you're not, so that you set expectations the right way. And every organization is not necessarily for everyone. It can be for everyone at a particular stage. And I think as leaders, we need to own that as well, and own up to the fact that there are things that we can, there are things we can't.
And be okay with that.
Yeah.
I think that'll set you apart from the rest. I don't have to appeal to everyone, or I don't have to appease to everyone's desire. So I hope you are enjoying everything that you're hearing. So with that, we are going to do a poll. Okay, so please, a poll is going to pop up on your screen. Let us know who you would love to connect with. Any of these organizations, from ThinkHuman on Loop to Bravely. All right. So before we close out, I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard so far. I would just love to hear from our panelists today, just that one step for people who may not necessarily be leaders. They may not have that positional power, right? What's that one thing that they could do to be intentional in creating that culture of support? Before you answer, panelists, first, we're going to have a poll pop up, okay? All right. I hope you've selected who you would love to connect with. But please, the floor is yours. What's that one thing that you would love for the panelists or the attendees to walk away with?
There is a question that popped up in the Q&A that said, how do you lead with intention when you yourself feel a bit lost? So I'm going to frame my answer around that, because I have felt this way myself over the course of the last 24 months a few times. And I think what it comes back to is that servant leadership. And again, you could be an individual contributor and embody servant leadership. You don't have to be a senior level executive to model this to the people around you. And I think it's really just about, sometimes at work, we can be so focused on the productivity and the outcomes, and we leave kindness for last, and leading from the heart, as you always talk about, Hakimia, I think it's the only way forward right now. And that would be, my guidance to anyone right now is what I said at the beginning: always leave people feeling better, no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sarah.
I would just say, organizationally, or with your colleagues or people you work with, providing the space to people to be fully themselves, and sort of be able to talk about whatever's on their minds, and not every Zoom call needs to be productive or needs to be a valuable work conversation. I think that I try and have a daily stand up with a couple of my most important leaders, and sometimes we never talk about work. And that's some of the most productive times we spend as a leadership team to strengthen connection and sort of release pressure. And I think Zoom calls can create this expectation that every conversation needs to be productive. And sometimes it's okay to just hear someone out and sort of understand what's truly going on, and not care about whether you sort of nail that goal in that conversation.
I would say, whether it's as an individual or as a team or as a leadership team of an organization, answering three things. What's the world that we want to see? Not what do we want to accomplish or what are our achievements, but what's the world we want to see? It's part one. Part two is being engaged ongoingly in our own self-awareness, like where are we against that world that we want to see, and being real about that. And then part 3, self-regulation, of just like truing ourselves up, not just like, okay, well, that's where we are, but like, okay, true up, true up, true up. So what's the world we want to see? Where are we? And what do we need to do to true up in any moment?
Thank you so much, Merida, for that. Thank you for your humanity. Thank you, Sarah, for your vulnerability. Thank you, for John, for your honesty. Thank you for being intentional today, for creating, this culture of support just in the world. And thank you all for your engagement, your kind words, your thank you, your love, your whoop whoops. You will get more of this for the rest of 2022. So be with us, stay with us, and all be great and divinely empowered up. Peace.
Thank you, everyone.
I love that, man.